Yeah, we're doing a series, and the topics that we're raising we think are incredibly practical is perhaps the first thing to say. I mean, they're not hypothetical, they're not theoretical. We're addressing issues that sooner or later affect every single one of us. There's absolutely no question about that. So, as we think about today and our reality, we live in, here's a profound thought. You don't hear anybody saying this these days, unprecedented times. They are, and with what's going on, it makes us think about all of these issues. Everything from, how am I going to get the care I need? What's going to happen if I become ill? Who's going to pay for it? I mean, issues that we're going to get into next week as well. So they're urgent, and yet they're everyday issues. So we're going to today talk about what's going on these days, but really it's every day. It's just that today's reality presents the issue and makes us think about it a little bit more. So let's really emphasize that we're here to help. And by the way, so the two groups, Stanford and the Villages. So Myra and I, we are both elders and we are both Stanford. So I mean, who could be more appropriate? Or we're just the perfect people to be talking with you guys today. So it's a pleasure. So today, to help, we're going to talk about the documents that you need to have. Some things are just fundamental. If you're age 18 or over, this is not just if you're 70 or over. These are the documents everybody should have in place. What's the talk you should have? What are the issues you should address with your family members, with your providers? What do your family members need to know? We're going to talk about a number of issues that directly and indirectly come up as you do your thinking and planning about how you want healthcare decisions made for you. Everybody's unique, so we have to be very comprehensive in our thinking. Okay, so today, as we focus on decision making and how you get there and what are the issues and what are the concerns, certainly to some extent, we are going to talk about the coronavirus and some of the very specific issues that it presents. Myra is so on top of this, it's fantastic. But again, it's not a coronavirus issue. It's an anything can happen issue. Any one of us can become ill at any time. Stroke, catastrophic event of any type. We could have a precipitous decline with dementia. We could be in an accident. And all of these issues present the questions about, what are the interventions that are appropriate for me? How are life-sustaining treatment decisions going to be made for me? I'm a unique individual. So I don't want some generic treatment done for me. I want my wishes to be understood and respected. Yeah. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is take a minute and introduce Myra. Now that we've given you the flavor and the content for what we're going to talk about, let's let you get to know the two of us a little bit more. And you can't see the slide up here, but there's Myra next to me. I guess you can see this screen, right? Myra graduated from Stanford undergraduate, was Phi Beta Kappa, went to Stanford Law School again, graduated in 1976, and joined the nonprofit world. She and I both, we were not typical. She graduated from law school, could have joined any big firm in the country. She became a volunteer advocate at a healthcare clinic in Palo Alto. It was called Our Health Center, I think it was. So the work that she's been doing now for decades, she started right out of Stanford, right into that issue, and she's still very much with it. Myra's one of the co-founders of the National Academy of Elder Law Attorneys, has done an enormous amount of writing and thinking about these topics, published articles, given talks all over the country. She also, very importantly, it's not even on the, thank you, Mark, it's not on the screenshot, but she also was a volunteer chaplain at Stanford Hospital. And, that's so important because you see families grappling with a lot of these issues. She was also kind of an advisor to the ethics committee at the Stanford Hospital. So again, there's many other things that she's done, but thinking about patient advocacy, thinking about the role that these documents play, and how do we deal with the healthcare system if we're in the hospital. Incredible expertise. So we're lucky to have her here today.
Yeah, and I want to also just introduce Mike, because that was a great intro for Myra. And just a note, I'm trying to share slides. The last two times I've tried to share, some strange blue screen popped up, and I think it's a Zoom issue. I don't know if there's a security issue. It's not on my computer. We're going to try to share slides. If we can't, we're going to do this verbally, and we'll walk you through all the issues as well. Yeah. And we'll send out the slides if you'd like after. We're going to do our best. to share slides, but if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. We want to still be here for you. So let me just spend just a moment introducing Michael Gilfix. So just like Myra Gerson Gilfix, he's one of my parents. And both Mike and Myra have been leaders in the field of elder law and healthcare decision-making since they both graduated from the Stanford Law School. So Mike graduated in 1973 after transferring to Stanford from University of Michigan as an undergrad. Just stayed in Palo Alto. I grew up in Palo Alto because they wisely stayed right near Stanford campus. When he graduated Stanford in 1973, he didn't look to join a big firm. He didn't look to join a big company. He wanted to change the world. So he looked for a community of individuals who were underserved by the legal field. And he was a social entrepreneur. He wanted to change the world and help people. And so he scanned the horizon, and two communities stood out: the elderly and Americans with disabilities. And he went out and he, along with Myra, changed the world. They worked together to create America's very first free legal aid program for the elderly, SALA, Senior Adults Legal Assistance, still exists today in Santa Clara County. Went around the country training people and training other attorneys to start other nonprofits to serve the elderly. So he raised money, spoke in front of Congress. They worked together to build free legal services around the country and really helped to create the field of elder law. And also was one of the first groups to focus on Americans with disabilities and legal planning for them. After having me and the first of my two younger sisters in the early 80s realized they had to actually make a little bit of money to stay in the Bay Area, and went into private practice and started Gilfix and the Pole Associates. So we've been, our firm Gilfix and the Pole has been around since 1983. And through that time, Mike and Myra have continued to be leaders. Written countless books, appeared in the media, national media, Wall Street Journal, USA Today, national talk shows. Continue to innovate and lead, and healthcare decision-making is core to what we do. We do estate planning, elder law issues, tax issues, long-term care issues, and we are proud members of the Stanford community. So it looks like we may have cleared up our technical issue. We'll go back to sharing slides, but we will be answering questions at the end. We won't really take questions during the talk. I'm going to turn it back over to Mike and Myra, and I hope that the screen sharing now works again, and we'll walk you through these very important issues. Hold on.
So even if the screen sharing does not work, we'll be very clear in identifying the topic and then going through the main issues that we think you need to be aware of. Okay, so the next slide would say the Advance Health Care Directive. So this is going to be kind of an introduction to the document, which is the key, which is really the heart and soul in so many ways of the talk that we're having today. So Myra, why don't you please introduce the topic and just go through what it is and why it's so important.
Yeah, the Advance Health Care Directive may be the best insurance that you can get. You know, Mike mentioned a whole lot of things that can cause temporary or permanent incapacity. And all of these things we need to look out for, including, of course, the coronavirus. And what the Advance Healthcare Directive lets you do are three things in general. One is choose an agent. And this may be the most important decision that you make in your life, because that person is going to be able to speak for you if you're unable to in a medical emergency or during a period of incapacity. You know, this is such a hard time. We have so little control, and this document actually gives us a measure of control. It also lets you express your wishes. It lets you go from, you know, knowing what your values are, what matters to you, and it lets you make your decisions, in some cases, explicit. I mean, if you know, for example, that you have COPD, you know, a chronic respiratory ailment, you may already know that you don't want ventilator care, for example. If you have ALS, you know, Lou Gehrig's disease, for example, you may know that you don't want nutrition and hydration at a certain point, but that the document does allow you to make those wishes explicit.
Sure, and you know, Myra's really making one of the most important points we can make, which is that when you do an advance directive, it shouldn't be a simple form. The California Medical Association has, if you have to use a form, that's probably the best one, but the check the box kind of thing is okay. But, you know, we have in another seminar, we use that commercial where it's okay, really okay for you? Well, no, it isn't. You know, you're an individual with individual desires and goals and fears, and we want to individualize things. So So next, let's look at what you can address in the document. And Myra will again, let's look at some of those topics, and then we'll get into the meat of,
Yes,
of the documents.
right. So needless to say, this person is pretty important to you. And, you know, a lot of people have advance directives already, and they may have appointed someone. Often you'll be surprised to know that the person that they've appointed doesn't know that they've appointed them or doesn't know what their wishes are. So that person does need to be willing to serve, will need to be ready to answer the phone if somebody calls. They need to understand the responsibility. I mean, it is a big responsibility to make decisions for someone else, but respecting your wishes means they also need to talk to you. They need to be willing to have the conversation with you. And sometimes a child may not be the best person because they may not want to hear that, you know, you don't want to have treatment to sustain your life. But whatever person you choose, you really need to know that they're going to respect your wishes. They also need to be, you know, confident about asserting your wishes with medical professionals. That means that they should be able to ask good questions. I mean, they have to be comfortable with Zoom these days, or maybe you FaceTime, because unfortunately, a lot of these conversations are not going to be held in person. So you need to know that person is going to be there for you. And if you do have an advance directive, check and make sure that that is still the one you want.
Okay, so moving on and further developing this whole the whole topic of what you can address. You know, actually, before this, about choosing the agent, let me add just one last point. You know, we so often say that when you choose the agent, it's not a matter of who do you love the most. It's not a matter of who's the oldest child. You know, who's, Myra said it so well, who's willing and able. So you have to be discriminating and thoughtful as you make this decision. Okay.
There's one more thing. You know, that there are instances where the person who's appointed a child to be their agent hasn't told the other children. And it's really awkward for, let's say, the older son to come to the emergency room and find out that the younger sister was appointed to be the agent. So it's really important to talk with your family about who it is. And maybe not just your children, you know, maybe your sister and brother, whoever, but the more people that understand what your wishes are and who's appointed to respect them and to represent them, the better.
Needless to say, that was not a hypothetical. That example Myra gave, you know, we've seen some family chaos ensue when the supposedly anointed child was not anointed. It happens all the time. Okay, so some of the issues that you address, I mean, most obviously, of course, end-of-life decisions. The vast majority say something like this, and this is not a hint. You know, our job when we draft these documents is to make sure that your wishes are honored. Okay, the vast majority say, if I'm ever completely out of it, I can't communicate at all, whatever the diagnosis is, and my doctors conclude that it's hopeless, you know, give it a little time, but then let me go. No nutrition and hydration through a tube, let me go. Now, many other people have different views. Nothing wrong with that. The point is, that's an issue that should be addressed, not in some vague one sentence point, but really getting into a lot of detail. When we draft these things, it's about a page and a half, single space, and walking through the issues here. Okay, you can be rather specific about where you want care to be provided. Now, this could be medical care. It could be hospice care if you're in your last months of life. Many are adamant about wanting to stay at home. And isn't that the essence of the villages? You want to stay at home. Sometimes easier said than done. There can be cost factors. The revocable trust that you have needs to be consistent with what you might say in your advance directive about being at home, because that can be a lot more costly than being in a facility. Organ donation, is that something you would allow? And no, being over 70 or over 80 does not mean that it's not an issue. There are still some internal connective tissues. It still is an issue. It doesn't disappear at some certain age. You can deal with the disposition of your remains. We'll talk about that. We'll give a few examples in just a moment. That is not as simple as you might think. And obviously with COVID, you know, there are specific issues that have arisen. Myra will talk about some of those a little bit later on, but again, some specificity flows from the circumstances that we're now dealing with. So now let's look at some examples. And again, the purpose here is to give you the flavor for what you can do. You might like some of these for your own document, but the idea is to get you thinking about what you would want to say. So Myra, you start, huh?
Well, I like talking about music. Some of our clients have actually specifically requested music to be played in their room, and not just any music, very specific. One client asked for Marlena Dietrich music. Mike, I'm his agent, by the way, has prohibited rap music. Yeah, no rap music. Some people don't even consider it music. I hope I'm not offending anyone to say that, but so none for Mike. I like this idea because I know that, I love music. And I know that music reaches the brain in ways that nothing else does, that it can stimulate people in a way nothing else can, and that some people are responsive to music. The other thing about it is it's something easy for your loved ones to do for you. They can actually play music and feel like they're contributing to your peacefulness or your good, your sense of completion. So it's just a gift to put something about this, I think, which of course you don't have to. And you may not want music in your room, but.
Sure. Okay, the next topic we have here is excluding relatives. Now, what the heck does that mean? Myra and I have been involved in a couple of California court cases that actually made law, appellate opinions where there's written opinions and all of this. And in one of them, it was a woman who was in an auto accident, was in a coma, and it was many years ago. And we went to court kind of pro forma to just have an order. The hospital wanted it to let her pass away. So we're at the courthouse, and at the last moment, her brother arrives with a lawyer to save his sister. Okay, and this phenomenon is not uncommon, where sometimes it's the estranged relative who shows up to save the sister or brother from this fate. Whether it's guilt, who knows? We refer to that, by the way, that phenomenon as the black sheep on the white horse, arriving at the last second. Now, because that is a well-known phenomenon, we're not making this up. The California legislature, when it put together the law on advance directives, there's a provision which says that if you have a relative who vehemently and openly disagrees with you and might even intervene against your wishes, you can name them in the document and they are deprived of the right to go to court. They're denied court jurisdiction. And a remarkable number of people have relatives like, often it's a religious issue, not always, but it's a point that can be vitally important for you. Prohibited treatments and interventions. There are some folks who have said, for example, that there's certain cancer treatments they don't want. They don't want radiation in specific circumstances, usually because they've been through it and they don't want it again. You can be specific. A very well-known, unnamed engineering professor at Stanford, I did his document. His document says in great detail that under no circumstances shall any form of anesthesia be used. He has a fear of anesthesia that dwarfs anything else. So his document is crystal clear. And, we're Bay Area Stanford crowd. If you want to be specific in your document about which brand of edibles you want to have in your room, you go right ahead. You can do that. Okay. Let's go on with a few more examples.
Pets. Well, I was going to try to cue up my dog. She's lying here behind me, but this dog actually looks like her. But a lot of people, including me, we love our pets. And I think that there's not much that would be more comforting than having your pet visit you. And I know that's probably hard in a lot of circumstances now, but you can request it in your document. And, who knows, maybe the pandemic will be over and we'll be able to have this again. The other thing to think about is care for your pets. Who's going to take care of your pet if you're incapacitated? Mike?
This is real stuff. Ashes. Okay, if you choose cremation, so many of us want to specify where we want our ashes distributed. And I'll tell you, some of the most fun discussions, hilarious discussions I've ever had has been with people about where their ashes are going to go. A couple of quick examples. A NASA employee ex-employee, excuse me, always wanted to go into space. So he's too old now. He's over 70. They wouldn't let him go, even if you could buy a ticket. Some of his ashes are going into space. His document says it. His trust says it. He set aside $50,000 to make sure there's enough money for a payload of his ashes someday to go to the stars. A delightful lady living in Mountain View, California. Her document says that her ashes are to be sprinkled at particular corners of particular department stores at the Stanford Shopping Center. Legal? Who knows? But are his kids going to do it? Her kids are going to do it. I guarantee they're going to do it. Last example, a guy who loved hunting. Some of his ashes are to be loaded into shotgun shells. His buddies take him to the duck pond where they did all their hunting and drinking, and they're to be shot into the air so his ashes are scattered upon the pond. So countless other examples. We won't bore you or stimulate you with more, but you get the idea. You can be specific. Religion, Myra.
Religion. So I think, some religions like Jehovah's Witnesses prohibit any blood products being used. But, some people just say, talk to my rabbi, talk to my priest. And I think, this would cover spirituality. And some people have said they want their agent to talk to their psychic counselor before they make any decisions. So I kind of, fudge on that and make it a religious issue.
So, the real point here is that you can do as you please, and you should. The only limit is your imagination. And this crowd, I mean, you guys are listening in, you're tuned in. You're just aware that these issues exist. Thanks to Donna, in part, thanks to Donna, you have access to us and countless others. So, by definition, you're a creative crowd, and you should be thinking creatively. Don't make these things dull. I mean, are they fun to think about your passing away and healthcare? Well, maybe not, but reality is we can deal with them in creative ways. So let's move on now and talk about a couple of documents where there's a little bit of confusion sometimes. So Myra, would you explain this, please?
Yeah, a lot of people don't understand, including a lot of lawyers, don't understand that the POST, which is Physician Orders for Life-Sustaining Treatment, it is a form, but it requires a conversation, and it's a decision-making process that allows, and another thing, it's only for people who are at risk of a life-threatening clinical event, people who have a serious chronic or acute medical condition, which also includes advanced frailty. But it can work with an advance directive. In other words, if you're near the end of life and you're likely to maybe have a heart attack or cardiac arrest, this allows you to say, I do want CPR, cardiopulmonary resuscitation, or you don't want it. It allows other treatment options that are relevant. And it is something that emergency medical providers can use. So if you have an advance directive, that's more general about your wishes. This takes those wishes with you to the end of your life and to that period of time. And it requires a conversation, not with a lawyer, but with a healthcare provider. It could be a doctor. I think in California, a nurse practitioner can also have these conversations. And it can also evolve. So if your medical condition gets more serious, you may change your mind about what you want. But these forms are available for people to look at. I wouldn't fill one out unless you have a doctor who's telling you that you're in that stage of life and is willing to have the conversation for you. And if you don't have capacity, let's say that you have dementia, severe dementia, you have an advance directive, your agent can have that conversation with the healthcare provider to take your wishes and put them in the form of medical orders, which is in this document.
Thank you. Great. There is confusion about that. They're complementary. The advance directive, we think, is more important.
Yeah, it is, and it's something that can be carried out through the POST near the end of life.
Mm-hmm. So again, patient advocacy is just a topic. If we gave her 3 to 12 hours, Myra would teach a graduate level course on the topic. But Myra, please lead us through this.
Yeah, I'm a firm believer that every single person who's going through a healthcare crisis or a healthcare scare even should have someone with them who can act as a patient advocate for them and with them. Um, and in this case, if you have an advance directive, it may be logical for your agent, the person that you appoint to make decisions for you, to serve in that role and help you. But it doesn't have to be that person. It could be a good friend. It could be, a family member. Um, but and if you do decide to have someone else act in that role for you, it would be a good idea to sign a HIPAA waiver. That's the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. That just prevents medical professionals from talking to someone because they're worried about violating your privacy. So having that waiver allows the person to talk with doctors on your behalf or with you and see your medical records if you like. Anyway, the advocate should be able to take notes and assert and defend. I think I've been cut off. Oh, there. Okay.
No, you're fine.
Oh, good. So my screen went blank. And it's hard in these days when you're not even allowed to have someone with you at the doctor's office. Now our daughter's pregnant. Her husband can't even go with her to the doctor. So, but you can call in. Your advocate can call in, maybe FaceTime and listen and maybe, take notes, ask questions, make sure the questions are answered. And, if you're in the hospital, again, that's even harder, but a lot of people are taking their notebooks, iPads, and it's not a time to let up on advocacy. So I strongly encourage everyone to consider doing this.
Actually, the last point was when you're not present, when the nursing homes and assisted living facilities were being shut down, and homes for individuals, group homes for folks with developmental disabilities on the autism spectrum, but group homes that were now cut off from family members. We tried to be a little bit creative, and just a couple of the ideas we had was, one of the reasons you like to visit, by the way, is so the staff members get to know you, so your loved one is not anonymous. It's a very key thing when it comes to quality of care. So one of the suggestions we made was that you could arrange to have meals and desserts delivered to the staff members who are taking care of your loved one. I mean, that's not so much being an advocate, but indirectly, I think it is. It's making yourself visible and going along with this sort of quality of care concern that we all have. Okay, so, COVID. We should talk about it to some extent. Again, it's really not a COVID discussion today, but it's on our minds. So, Myra, let's do that, okay?
Well, yeah, I mean, we generally with clients, we explore their health issues so we can help them plan for eventualities that they know or think might be in their future. With COVID, most people are worried about specific things that I'll get into a little bit later, but it's really important, again, that you have that agent available, because if you have serious respiratory problems, you may either end up in the hospital and you may be unable to communicate. So you want someone available to make decisions, maybe number one, about whether you even go to the hospital, but confirm now, make sure that you do have someone available, because this pandemic, this virus is unpredictable. It could strike any one of us. And we don't know how serious it'll be. I mean, it's just really hard. And of course, you want to know if that person is going to be comfortable in this kind of high stress situation, where we know almost for sure they're going to have to be communicating through technology, the technology that doesn't allow in-person visits. And you should discuss this with your family. Discuss what you want. As with everything else, the documents are only as good as the conversations. So you can use your advance directive, if you have one, to sort of be the outline. go through your document. And if you don't have one, this is the time. This is the time to do it.
Let's emphasize that. If you haven't done an advance directive, come on. I mean,
what are you waiting for?
Yeah, I mean, it's frankly, it's almost irresponsible, not just for you, but for your family members. We often describe the advance directive as a gift to your family members so they know what you want. So if they ever have to make these difficult decisions, they're not just dripping with guilt. They know with a degree of satisfaction that they're honoring your wishes. I mean, it's magical. And anybody of any age, when all three of our kids turned age 18, we had them sign one of these things. You never know. You never know. Okay. Now, again, this is an aspect of advocacy, and it's a question of being safe in the hospital, things you have to watch out for. So let's go through just a few of these items, just heads up for you, okay? Myra?
So needless to say, something I've been preaching for years, hand washing, hand hygiene is the single biggest prevention of hospital-based infections and infections everywhere. But now, the public is aware because of COVID, but it's still important to monitor that and to make sure that people are doing that, whatever setting you're in. Also, common problems of being in a hospital, duplicative testing. I just read an article that doctors were talking about the fact that now they're much more careful when ordering tests because, they can't afford the time and energy, and people can't afford the money of doing tests that aren't going to contribute to treatment. So, at least one small benefit of this awful thing. And, drug intake, the monitoring of that has always been a problem. People are given the wrong drugs, the wrong doses all the time. And that's something that, again, an advocate can usually help with. This is hard because we are not allowed in the hospital with our loved ones. So, whatever way that you can do it, whether it's remotely, keeping in touch with healthcare providers, doing some of the things that Mike talked about to be known to those people, do nice things for them, but, be as present as you can.
So as we think this through, let's look at one of the treatments that we read about constantly, ventilators. And again, twofold reason. Reason number one is I think this is interesting. I think it's very interesting and it's something we need to know. But again, it presents the issue of what's right for you and what are the kinds of things that you really want your healthcare agent to explore for you. Not simple stuff. So symbolic of the whole topic of healthcare decision making. So the question we're presenting here, is it rational or is it contrarian to question the role of ventilators these days?
Yeah, well, I don't think it's irrational to question the role of ventilators. I mean, even before COVID, ventilator care was fraught with all kinds of bad after effects and long-lasting impairments. So a lot of people that we're seeing, well, first of all, in the old days, before COVID, if you didn't have an advance directive, if you hadn't made your wishes known, you would automatically be ventilated if you looked like you were going to die, unless you were. So now it's unclear because even some hospitals are talking about, I don't want to call it rationing, but certainly not using a ventilator unless it's really going to do some good. Some people are actually worried about being denied ventilator care if, say, they have an underlying condition. One woman who had cancer and had survived was really worried that she might be denied ventilator care because of her bout with cancer. From her perspective, she felt like, I survived cancer. I want to keep living. If a ventilator can keep me going, then I want that ventilator. A lot of people don't want ventilator care no matter what, because there is a huge percentage of people who fail to survive another huge percentage of people who end up with lasting impairment because of it. And they just don't want to be put into that torture, and they don't want to deprive other people of ventilator care. That's not, necessary. And others don't want to go to the hospital at all. They don't even want to have it be an issue. To be fair, there are some less invasive treatments that can be life-saving in COVID. At first, doctors were intubating people who probably didn't really need to be intubated. We've discovered that, the oxygen saturation can go way down, and you don't necessarily need to be on a ventilator with COVID. So they've discovered other ways to provide oxygen much less invasive. Even proning, turning people over on their bellies, can improve oxygen saturation rate in your blood. So it may not be that it's a death sentence to say, I don't want ventilator care, but you really need to think very much about this, because this can affect your quality of life forever. And if you are sick, if you have COVID, it might just make things worse, because ventilator care can also cause lung damage, not just keep you breathing.
And I want to actually just expand quickly on Myra's note about just general patient advocacy. I think COVID is a very timely and very critical issue to think about, but hospital errors, where just mistakes by a hospital result in death. Some estimates say it's the third leading cause of death in America every year. Between 250 and over 400,000 people per year die, according to studies, because of hospital and medical errors. So having someone there to keep track of things and to check in on things that often we think we go to the hospital, you outsource it to the professionals. Well, especially now, they're overwhelmed in many cases. They have a lot to keep track of. So having that advocate there can be life-saving during this crisis and all times. I just want to make that point.
Sure.
Yeah,
And that's one of the main reasons that many of us say in our advanced directives that, I don't want to be in a hospital, or more importantly, again, going to the villages, I want to stay at home. I don't want to go into any facility, no nursing home, no hospital, nothing. I want to stay right here. And again, let's make this a point about how this affects your planning and your thinking. To say that you want to stay at home no matter what the cost is, this gets into the topic we're going to address next week. How do you pay for the potentially enormous cost of care at home? If that's your wish, your advance directive actually needs to be coordinated with language in your revocable living trust. These things have to talk together. Presumptive language in some of these other documents actually takes you in a different direction. So there's a need for consistency in the documents, making sure that the key people involved know what your wishes are. And I'll tell you, the other factor that isn't discussed is the cost of care. There was a series that won I don't know if it was a Pulitzer, but won a prestigious prize called The Cost of Dying. That was in the San Jose Mercury a few years ago. It talked about decisions made by this young woman, the daughter of the gentleman who passed away, authorizing 3 interventions that she subsequently concluded he never would have wanted. The other thing she did is she put the price tag for each one of those interventions. So when real people are dealing with these issues, cost is one of the factors not discussed, but yet it's top of mind. And it goes to all of these things.
Yeah, Mike, on that point, I think the more that we all ask of doctors, how much is this going to cost? They probably can't answer, but don't stop asking, because the more people ask, the more pressure to get that kind of information out there.
So the letter of guidance is a document, it's a letter that we have for decades recommended that parents of children who have disabilities write, so that when mom and dad pass away and they have a kid who's on the autism spectrum, developmentally disabled, schizophrenic, that those who take over the care of that child know about that child, what makes them happy, what gets them upset, what are the key things that you'd want a caregiver to know about your family member. Well, this is conceptually identical. What, beyond the language of your documents, what is important to you and what might you want your caregivers to be thinking about? So this is a letter you write to your family. It can be as informal as you like, but we evolve in our thinking, and your document can be a little bit static. So again, How do you deal with these issues? How do you deal with staleness and being current? This is one of the ways. You're writing a letter to your family members and to your agent. Okay, so let's give it a little broader perspective right now and think about your action steps. Myra, let's just really quickly go through this, and then we'll talk about how it all fits together for you.
Yeah, again, if you haven't already done an advance directive, start the process right now. I mean, make it happen. Have the conversation with your family, have the conversation with your lawyer, draft the document, sign it. If you have done it, as Mike said, it might need to be modified and updated. And he just suggested how. Make sure that your agent knows that they're your agent and that they're available and that they're willing to act for you. And give a copy of the advance directive to your regular primary care provider and to your family. Make your family members aware that you have it. And as Mike said, write a letter of guidance. And you know, if you can, keep updating it. But even if you can't, but you can still carry on a conversation, I'm telling family members, have the conversation, keep asking, because your wishes might change.
So one of our concluding points here is to kind of put things together. It's a little artificial to isolate out healthcare decision-making when we're talking about planning for our individual futures and for the future of our families. We always look at this whole process from a multi-generational perspective, which frankly is one of the reasons it's very cool to have Mark involved, because he does bring the perspective of the next generation. And you know, once you think about it, isn't it obvious that it's cool that us elders, we're doing our own thinking and planning, but if we can communicate with the next generation and actually coordinate our planning up and down, coordinate things, everything is going to be more effective. So we want to talk about the advance directive, but more. So the key documents, this is our focus last week. We'll take 2 minutes on it. Everybody should have, in addition to the advance directive, a durable power of attorney, not a simple form, a reasonably sophisticated document. If you have any assets at all, you need to have not just a simple will, because that means the estate goes through probate, a revocable trust. Already mentioned is the fact that you need to coordinate the wishes that you might have that could be expensive, for example, in your advance directive. It needs to be acknowledged and be consistent with language of your trust. Presumptively, the person who takes over as your trustee, they're supposed to take care of you and also be careful with your assets. And that can sometimes mean that they're going to try to protect and preserve your assets while you say, no, I don't want that. Spend anything. Keep me at home. Keep me comfortable. I don't want to go anywhere, and I don't care if it burns through my estate. So if that's your wish, that needs to be in your revocable trust. So finances need to be addressed. And when you do these documents, you're not going to leave a vacuum. We didn't mention it yet, but if you don't do these documents and something happens with you and you're not able to take care of yourself, somebody has to go to court and set up what's called a conservatorship. A judge takes over your life, which is a horrible thing. The fees are dramatically higher than anything they could ever be here, but it's very intrusive, you know, and you just don't want anybody else. You don't want the court system to decide what's going to happen with you. So the steps that you can take to make sure that never happens, they're not that complicated. You know, we're not the only attorneys who can help you with that. We are available, but, you know, go to your attorney. Make sure somebody who knows what they're doing puts all of these pieces together for you. Staleness is a factor. You should review these documents every couple of years, every 3-4 years at least, if not sooner. The other points we've already made, you know, that you have to make sure that the key people in your lives, the key people given responsibility, know that they have these responsibilities. And that's the point Myra made earlier is awesome. Make sure that those who think they're going to have a role but are not going to have a role, make sure they know as well. I mean, these things should not create disharmony. You don't want to leave a legacy of disharmony among your family members. So communication is most typically the key to that. So with that in mind, Mark's going to come in and talk about how we'll just be available to answer some quick questions for you. No fees. You know, we're available more broadly, but Mark will kind of, as I say, lead you through this.
Yeah, so for members, we went through a lot here, and in our talk last week, we talked about a lot of other issues. Next week, we're going to talk about long-term care planning and how you can protect your assets. There's a lot here. We understand that. We can't get to everyone's questions here, although I think we're going to take a couple minutes at the end to answer a few. But if you want to chat with us, we are offering office hours in the spirit of Stanford. 15-minute calls if you want to set that up. There's no cost. You can talk to Mike or I, or if we're not available when you need it, one of our other attorneys, and we can answer any questions you have about this, no strings attached. Here's information. I think Donna will help send that out after this talk. She'll send an easy way for you to also contact us, but you can call our office, find us online, gilfix.com. You can call us at 650-493-8070. One of our staff members, Ashley Deck, spelled a little bit uniquely. You can email her as well. Just mention that you were on our webinar, and we are happy to take some time to chat with you for about 15 minutes to answer any other questions you have. So just want to throw that out there. We love connecting with members of the villages and of course, the Stanford community. We are a Stanford family, as you can see. Go Carter. So I'll turn it over to Donna to lead us through the last few steps here.
I mean,
to highlight some things that Mike said, and I'm unmuting people so we'll be able to give our representatives applause.
None of the sound is screwed up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have three voices.
I unmuted people so that we could applaud, but some people are obviously doing some other things instead of paying rapt attention. But I just wanted to point out one thing that Mike said, and I am unmuting the three of you.
Myra.
I just want to point out one thing that you said, that this is a gift to your family members, that they know what you want. And just personally from my family, I can say what a gift it was that my family members did this, so that with everything else going on in the chaos, we knew what they wanted, so we had that level of confidence. And so really when you're thinking about, you know, putting this off for later, think of your family and don't put it off. And also want to make sure that a lot of us do these documents and then we put it away. So that, as I said, please check them regularly. National Healthcare Decisions Day was April 16th, so it's every day the day after tax day. Since tax day was postponed until July, you still have 2 months, so please make sure that you review your healthcare directives if you've already done them, and please update them. And now I am going to unmute everybody so that we can give a well-rounded applause to our speakers. So thank you guys so very much, and then we'll have questions right after. So thank you guys very much.
okay.
And then if you'd like to do some questions, if you can put them into the chat, and then Mark, do you provide the questions?
Yeah, let's see if I can see the
I have one. Frankly, this came up the last time we did this, but it's such a simple, important thing. It's a question of, do you have to have an advance directive notarized? It's a really simple logistical thing, because like if you're in a nursing home getting it, it's often hard to find a notary these days. The advance directive can be notarized, or there can be two witnesses. So it's set up so you don't need notarization. It's a practical point to just bring home. Okay.
Yeah, I actually can't see the chat. So Donna, if you have any you want to read out loud to us, we can go through them that way.
And for any attendees, if you look at the bottom, if you hover at the bottom of your screen, if you're on a laptop or computer, there's a chat option. And so you can click that and you can send some questions to our speakers. And in the meantime, if you guys have some additional information you'd like to share.
Just to clarify, did he say you don't need people to notarize?
Right. For the advance directive, it can either be notarized or you can have two witnesses.
Oh, two witnesses.
Yeah.
It can't
Unfortunately,
be healthcare providers.
other planning documents, we still do have to notarize, like power of attorney and trust. We're trying to get guidance from the state on what flexibility we can get, but right now you do have to notarize those.
Right. And what was that thing in the COVID related section, or no, in the being safe in the hospital? Is that a tie you're wearing?
Oh,
Oh.
Myra, why don't you tell them about your experience?
Yeah, well,
real quickly.
I was in the emergency room a few years ago, and all these residents were coming up to me, and I noticed that one man he had on short sleeve shirt, and he was not wearing a tie. And, you know, as someone who's very conscious of infection transmission, I complimented him. And he said, yeah, I'm an infectious diseases specialist. And I looked around at the other doctors who either had long sleeves or ties or both. And I said, why don't you teach your colleagues?
Yeah.
Oh, fun, interesting.
I'm glad you asked.
Yeah.
Good to know. Good to know.
And then Mark, can you see the questions or do you want me to read them?
No, I'm having trouble, so why don't you read us one?
Okay, so the next one is, are posts legally binding? I.e., if you've done one, doctor others have to carry out an advanced healthcare directive not legally required to be followed. Much literature about their not being honored.
Do posts have to be honored? Well, I mean, they're much more likely to be honored because they are in the form of medical orders.
And they're contemporaneous.
Yes.
They're much more likely to have been signed very, very recently when the issue comes up.
And it is true that advanced directives are not always honored, but that's why, you know, you need to translate in the last year of life, if you can, those wishes into a post. And also, emergency medical people are not obligated to honor an advanced directive, but they are obligated to honor a post if you have a DNR order in the post.
And then I've got one more question and then we'll, would you ever
I already forwarded it. I forwarded it to him.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I'm going to mute.
I forwarded it.
Appointing 3 agents and requiring a majority to agree on major health decisions such as when to start hospice with a family member with dementia?
So I think the question was, there's some other voices. I think the question is it a good idea, or what if you name 3 people and you said 2 out of 3 shall vote?
Correct.
That is inconsistent with the idea of doing a reasonably sophisticated advanced directive where you are explicit about what you want done. There should be no voting. I mean, ideally, your wishes are crystal clear. I also strongly, personally believe that it should not be a committee, that you should have a responsible individual where the proverbial buck stops, that if more than one person has responsibility, it's hard to find anybody with responsibility.
Right.
Some people will name 2 people, or I've never seen anybody name 3. I've never seen that.
Mike, I agree with that. And I think it's important to say, I want you to communicate with the other members of my family, but really one person should have that decision-making responsibility in accordance with your wishes.
That's interesting, because I've always thought it was 2, and I have 2, because if something happens to the first one, or they're not available, or they're out of town and couldn't get here, then it would go to the second person, no?
That's a different topic. So that's what you did is appropriate. You said, I'm naming one person, but if she can't do it, I've named an alternate. So that's different from co-agents, where they're named co-equally. Yeah, you did exactly what you should do.
Okay, and on that note, we are at 4 o'clock, so I just want to say thank you again to our speakers. And on the 21st, we hope you'll join us again for multi-generational planning for quality long-term care. And please join me in thanking our speakers.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Excellent.
fantastic.
Great job.
Bye-bye all.
Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye. Bye.